Thanks everybody for joining our meeting today. A couple of just little minor notes. We'll post out for the March meeting, but end of the month for what our topic will be, presentation stuff. Today, we're fortunate enough to have Tom Henricksen present for us. He's done many presentations for us, all of them very good. And I suppose with that, Tom, that's all I have. So you go ahead and take it on.
Excellent. Excellent.
Oh, I will say this. If you have questions, go ahead and use the chat and we'll kind of monitor it and let Tom know if you have questions or if he wants to watch it as well. He can see if there's a question pop up as well.
Sure.
So with that, I'll just let you go.
Excellent. Here's a string of thoughts that ran across my mind early in my programming career. Why can't people just leave me alone and I can do my work? I can figure this out myself. I don't need any others' input to turn this thing around. Why don't people understand me? I think it must be they're just dumb. They don't recognize genius when they see it. Perhaps you've been there too, a frustrated developer who feels like they know enough. However, the success you thought you'd have is out of reach. You see others who make better strides, but why? Is it a skills gap? I want to share with you how I learned about my skills gap. Java, check. Linux, check. SQL, check. Humans, what? Humans are hard. Code is easy. So I focused on the technology. One of my first mentors was a database administrator named Doyle. He really knew his stuff, but he didn't say much. That can make learning challenging. One thing Doyle would do is fix the problem for me. He would fix it so quickly and then leave. What did you do? He was already gone. Working with Doyle gave me some insight. Technical people hate explaining basic stuff. Ask them a simple question and they will flip the bozo bit on you. What is the bozo bit, you say? A few years after working with Doyle, I worked with a software architect named Corey. He had many interesting observations. One thing Corey would do, if you asked him one stupid question, one that you probably could have answered by doing a little basic research on your own, he wouldn't answer your question or work with you. That is the bozo bit. Bozo, of course, referring to Bozo the Clown, bit in reference to computer bit or binary storage. Corey was pretty extreme, but many developers can be that way. To gain respect from those developers, we need to know the technology. So I focused on the coding. I kept my head down and tried to avoid getting the bozo bit flipped on me. A few years later, I transitioned into a new job, technical lead. One year during my annual evaluation, my leader shared with me, Tom, we think you have solid credentials. Coding skills got you the job, but we need you to develop other skills. My leader shared with me where I was failing. Delegation. He shared how I wasn't delegating work to my teammates. I thought it was easier to do much of the work myself. Case in point, there was an upgrade that needed to be done. I did the work in 10 minutes or so. To explain that to some of my teammates would have taken twice that amount of time or more. Another trap I fell into with delegation is the belief in our value. We can convince ourselves that we are worth more when others can't do the same work as us. I remember working with Jamie the first time. I wasn't quite sure he understood what we were doing. He was always done quickly. Then I finally asked him. Here he had created a script to deploy changes and update dependencies. I was doing this all manually. I was worried about delegation, and the people I worked with had better ideas. Perhaps I didn't know everything I thought I did. A few years later, I got to work with a leader named John. We knew each other through a mutual friend. Now, I had begun to coach individuals and teams, and John wanted an outside resource to help him change his team's mindset. He shared how most IT people work with others in a transactional fashion. We get the requirements and we solve the issue. John said, Tom, my team is like bank tellers. They get asked to fix something and they do, just like a teller gets a check and deposits the check. I want my team to be more like financial planners. A financial planner builds relationships. Then they can anticipate needs. So you're saying, John, you want your team to have better relationships with their customers? John said, Tom, if my team has better relationships with their customers, they will develop empathy and understanding. Relationships? Understanding and empathy? Huh? That won't work. That's what I thought at the time, but I was wrong. John knew his team wasn't as understanding and as empathetic as he'd hoped they'd be. He began requiring them to talk to the community directors when they traveled. These conversations helped them begin to build relationships. Instead of just fixing the problem, they fostered relationships too. Each little change John made helped his team understand. These community directors had many things on their plate. These conversations also worked the other way too. The community directors began to give John's team space. If something went wrong, they trusted them to resolve it. John proved me wrong. He overcame his deficit by being curious and empathetic. He was able to change the way his team interacted with the organization. John also became very influential in the organization, so much so that he has since been given additional responsibilities. From bank tellers to financial planners, he remade the image of his IT team. This brings me to my main idea. Coding skills got you the job. Influence will get you the career. Coding skills got you the job. Influence will get you the career. What do I mean? Developers are focusing on technology skills only. If you truly want to set yourself apart, we need to know how to influence and collaborate with teams. Now, gone are the days when we can just send in requirements with pizza and out pops code. Organizations are looking for more from their programmers. The problem, my problem, was I was terrible at relationships. I had confirmation. I had proof. Although I didn't start out as a developer though, my first stop in my professional career was quite different. I remember it like it was yesterday, my first day at Wallace. What is Wallace, you say? Well, we sold business forms and office supplies in Des Moines, Iowa, kind of like Dunder Mifflin. Armed with a business management degree and no real idea, I had 3 job options. I could sell insurance, or I could sell life insurance, or I could sell business forms. So I did what any sane person would do. I sold business forms. Who wants to call on their friends' parents for insurance anyways? Did I mention that Des Moines, Iowa is the insurance capital of the world? Back to my first day at Wallace. Can you believe I had to make a few cold calls before lunch? Now, let me remind you that in college, the only time I called my friends was when we were having a kegger. Getting people to buy business forms is a bit more difficult than getting college students to drink beer. Now, I really didn't want to make those calls, but lunch was getting close. I was given 3 prospects from another sales representative to call on. Hello, is Mike Huff available? Can you tell him Tom Henricksen called? I'm from Wallace. Ooh, one down. Hello, this is Tom Henricksen, your new Wallace representative. Oh, sorry, Mr. Hegna. I apologize if our labels fell off your product. Whoops. I guess we got disconnected there. Okay, just one more and we can go to lunch. What? Do we call on gentlemen's clubs? My coworkers all die laughing. Turns out this is their way of initiating new sales reps. Similar to Tommy Boy, my sales techniques were not appreciated. And soon after that first day in sales, I started to realize something. This wasn't going anywhere. Lucky for me, a friend from high school had reached out and shared with me the opportunity in technology. So I began to pursue a new degree and head in a different path. Now, I began work as a developer. Now, working as a developer is quite a bit different than working in sales. For instance, in the sales office, the newest rep had to go get beer for everyone on Friday. On Fridays in the sales office was quiet like the rest of the week. Also, the sales office I worked in was always full of people. They would be talking on the phones to customers or talking to each other. The developers I worked with, they were a quiet bunch on the whole. Now, perhaps it kind of sounds like I didn't want to make this change, but that was not the case. I slowly began to realize I was more Spock than Jimmy Fallon. The quiet contemplative work of a developer suited me more. Now, as I began my career as a developer, I started to work on lots of different technologies, most of them pretty old at the time. But I began to hear a lot of buzz around the Java language. Now, this was a few years ago, but I started to work through some tutorials on nights and weekends and learn Java myself. Now, all this work paid off a few months later when a company leader came to me and said, "Tom, would you be able to help Dave with a new application?" Turns out they needed someone who could write an application using Java. I, of course, agreed. Like Luke beginning to use the Force, I was starting with some basics. As my career progressed, I worked with someone who was quite sharp from a technical perspective. But Eric was hard to get along with. He would yell at people he worked with. You might say he was a complete jerk sometimes. The team and the managers put up with it in a large part because he was able to code a lot. I can still hear it, still see it now when I close my eyes. Now, I want to remind you that Eric was a smoker and he was trying to quit. Now, that made Eric even more testy, if you can believe. I was walking down a row of cubes. Now, Eric and Sri were working together on some files. As I came walking down the row of cubes, I saw that Eric was in Sri's cube and his hands were up and his veins, well, his veins, you know how people's veins look like they're going to pop out of their head? Eric's veins looked like they were going to explode and he was yelling at him. And then he ran out the door. I guess he needed a smoke. I went up to Sri and said, "Sri, are you okay?" He looked at me and said, "Yeah, Tom, I'm fine, but nobody should have to put up with him." Sri couldn't have been more correct. Eric was a tyrant who ran around like Darth Vader, intimidating everyone. We all put up with it because he was so productive. Now, you might think, well, just because developers act like Spock, well, let me remind you that we have feelings too. If you ever work with someone like Eric, who's not a real team player, they might take some of the easy stuff and make it easier for others. However, that can stunt the overall growth of the group. If you work with a coding hero like Eric and they take vacation, things can fall apart. Let me tell you about a leader who dealt with a similar issue. Now, Ben was a leader I worked with, and he had a coding hero on his team, kind of like Eric, but we'll call him Dave. Now, Dave would code solutions that were more complex than others could understand. And Dave was coming up on a milestone birthday. he decided to take 3 weeks off. He was going to bicycle across multiple states with all his gear. Now, Ben knew this was going to be an issue, so he met with the team and discussed the challenge. The team decided to have knowledge transfer sessions with Dave. Ben helped foster this collaboration. It also helped the team become more resilient as they chipped away at this knowledge gap. At my next stop in my career, I began to master my skills in Java. Now, working in software development is a bit like song sales on iTunes. One day something's hot, the next day it's out of date. During this time in my career, many open source tools became popular. Mastery for Luke Skywalker came after a battle with Darth Vader. Programmers, we have small battles each day. As Stephen Pressfield says, the amateur tweets, the pro works. Professional programmers show up every day and slay small demons. Now, the first skill I had to master as a developer was debugging. Now, let me remind you that the tools today are much more mature, but the first application I had to debug, I was armed with print statements in a log file. Quite primitive by today's standards. All right, let's see here. How can I tell where that value is being set? Okay, add a print statement, recompile. Oh, I forgot the semicolon. All right, semicolon, recompile, run report. You got to be kidding me. The database. I got to set up the database. Okay, alter table, run report, tail log. Now that looks better. Of course, debugging today is so much easier with today's tools, but we still have to use the old bean. As Steve McConnell points out in his book, Code Complete, we need to learn the types of mistakes we make. I can still see it in my mind when I used to, early in my Java career, make the same mistake time and again. I worked with a gentleman named Ken, and he would always come and point out my obvious error. What I would do in my Java code is forget to initialize my variables, and Ken would always laugh and point out my obvious mistake. Software developers like to impress each other. I had to use the singleton pattern to fix that. There are many esoteric topics we can talk about for hours. But in the Essentialism, the Disciplined Pursuit of Less, Greg McEwen talks about the importance of editing to journalism. The journalists bring the stories and write the stories, but the editor must do the important part. So they take the story and rework it. Now, over my years as a developer, I've mentored many young developers. One in particular sticks out. He began reading about code basics. He would add unnecessary code from time to time. I remember debugging an issue he was getting together. As we sat down and were looking through his code, I remember saying to him, "Why is this loop here?" He turns to me and says, "I don't know. I thought it would help." He thought it would help. Adding code is easy. Knowing what to keep is hard. Now, it's not that I am saying computer science basics are not important. However, if we put our sole focus on them, our careers will falter. We spoke before about Eric. Now, he had mastered computer science basics. However, his teammates couldn't stand him though. So as software developers, we need to be good at our work and get along with our teammates. If we do just one of these, we aren't doing our job. As my career progressed, I learned more soft skills, and I got various promotions along the way. My first stop, of course, I was just a developer. Then I moved into a senior developer role, then a technical lead, and then into a manager as software development. Now, as I went through and managed a team for a few years, I thought I knew what I was doing. However, one day I realized there was a new lesson to learn. I remember coming to work. It was a Friday morning in May. I came to work at my normal time. I had dropped my kids off at school. I came into the office a little before 8 a.m. Oddly enough, my boss was in. Anyways, I sat down and unpacked my things. Then Scott, my boss, came to my desk and said, "Tom, can I talk with you?" I said, "Sure." And I followed him to his office. However, when we got there, he took a right instead. That's strange. Then he took a left into Sandy's office. Who is Sandy, you ask? Well, she was the director of human resources. I knew something was up then. Scott and I sat down with Sandy. And then Scott looked at me and said, "Tom, this is your last day here." If you've ever heard that said to you at work or in a relationship, you know exactly how it feels. They discussed the next steps. I packed my things and left. Getting fired gives us a chance to reflect. What did I do wrong? How could this have been avoided? As I look back, I realized one lesson first. What led to this was clarity. I did not clearly understand an objective. I needed to ask better questions. The team I led didn't execute accordingly. Processing this, though, can take time as we want to blame others. However, we need to own our mistakes. The second lesson I learned was the importance of relationship management. As John taught us earlier, we need to continually foster those connections. I began to reach out to my network, and the opportunities were plentiful. So even in a trying time like getting fired, there is a lot of wisdom there. We just need to take the time to unpack it. Mastering basic skills requires guidance. Early in my programming career, I worked with a software developer named Wei, and he taught me how important that software development is essentially problem solving. Wei began to notice that I would try to solve 5 things at once. Of course, a few years later, Wei's guidance was brought clear to me at a seminar I attended. At Michael Hyatt's Best Year Ever conference, he discussed goal setting. Now, Michael said, "Detailed plans are great if you're building a nuclear submarine. For everything else, just focus on the next step." Wei and Michael agreed on this point. Don't overthink it. In Proverbs, it is said, "In the multitude of counselors, there is safety." Luke Skywalker's first journey brought him to Obi-Wan Kenobi, where he learned some basics, similar to what I learned from Wei. He kept learning, and so have I. Reflection doesn't come easy for me. I like to charge on to the next thing. In David Marquis' book, Leadership is Language, he details the importance of red work, the doing, and blue work, the thinking. He details how both are important to making progress. He uses the example of the Industrial Revolution, where the workers did the red work and the managers did the blue work. Today, however, knowledge workers must do both. We need to reflect, take a step back, and think about how we're doing. How could I improve my coding, debugging, or testing? Now, I know what you're thinking at this point in the presentation. Hey, I'm a developer. I don't need no stinking soft skills. If you're thinking that, keep on keeping on if you don't want your career to improve. However, my career path has changed dramatically as I've realized the importance of communication, influence, and relationships. Let's explore 3 core soft skills that will set the stage for a career transformation. So remember, Coding skills got you the job. Influence will get you the career. Number one, communication. Listen to what is being said. Ask good questions and seek clarity. Developers who do this write better code. In The Pragmatic Programmer, Andy Hunt and Dave Thomas talk about the importance of digging for requirements. We need to look between the lines. Listen to what is being said. Many times in my career, I've opened my mouth and just started talking. Know what you want to say and say it. Number two, influence. In How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie, he talks about the importance of talking in terms of the other person's interest. Now, early in my career, I remember trying to convince a corporate vice president that we needed to use some new technology. He wasn't interested at all. However, the next time I spoke to a corporate executive, I aligned a technical change with a corporate objective. The outcome of that conversation was quite different. Number three of the three core soft skills is leading change. To lead a change, we need to share the vision. Now, a few years ago, I was lucky to work with an excellent product owner named Nikia. We began to work together on a product for customer service representatives. As we began, the team worked through the user stories. Nikia began to realize the team wasn't really understanding the true vision. That's when Nikia realized and had an epiphany. We needed a field trip. So Nikia had the entire team spend a day with those customer service representatives. We got to listen in on the calls they took. We got to see them struggle with the existing application. That's when the team started to understand the true vision that Nikia had. We came back the next day, energized and ready to go. Nikia was able to lead a change by sharing and connecting us with the vision. These three core soft skills can change your career direction. Let me share a story how they changed mine. In the first team I led, I tried to get to know the team. This can help build trust and influence with them. However, maybe you're thinking, these won't work for you. Let me share a story about AJ. His path was a rocky one. AJ was a strong developer, but he rarely talked. He worked in a slow, methodical fashion and always kept his emotions in check. His teammates became irritated with his style over time because of his unwillingness to communicate. I tried to connect with AJ. For instance, we connected on a few things. For instance, he had traveled to Germany to pick up his new BMW. However, the team was getting irritated with his style, and the product owner was ready to give up on him. That's when my manager came to me and said, "Tom, it is time for AJ to decide if he wants to be part of the team." My manager asked me to put AJ on a PIP, or performance improvement plan. I had 60 days to help him improve or else. When I met with AJ and explained the situation, he began yelling at me and stormed out of the meeting. The first 2 weeks after that incident were quite shaky. I kept checking in on AJ daily. He wouldn't talk to me or anyone else on the team. I knew he was an introvert and he needed his space and time. Eventually, AJ and I sat down and discussed the PIP. He discussed how frustrated he was. I got AJ to agree to try some experiments. We met as a team and crafted some working agreements. These detailed how we would work together and how we would collaborate. The product owner gave him one final shot. In the end, we were able to give AJ the space he needed. By coaching him and his teammates, we were able to work through it. AJ developed the soft skills he needed to change his career direction. I was able to help AJ, myself, and others. You can do this too. Coding is important, but it's not enough. We can keep our head down and bozo it through our career, but that won't get us where we want to go. Relationships matter. Empathy and understanding matters. Communication matters. These soft skills, which will lead to more success, which leads to more influence. People choosing you to be on their team, managers choosing you for the most exciting projects. Practicing soft skills is how you code the future of your dreams. Any questions, comments?
I have a question for you. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
How do you feel about the term soft skills?
That's a good question, Carter. It's one of those that's been used a lot. I know some places will use, I guess I've worked a little bit with the DevOps Institute. They have, what do they call it? E-skills and like people talk about T-shaped skills. But yeah, it's one of those, it can be a little bit overused, but I guess when I use it, I feel like most people know somewhat what I'm talking about, I guess.
Yeah, I actually just posted an article on LinkedIn about this because I don't like the term, but I don't know if I have a reason not to. I think it just doesn't seem like it's a powerful enough adjective for the power that it is, right? That's my problem with it for some reason.
Yeah. Well, I think it's that, and then also too, it's like we need to come up with a term that a better term to use, but it's hard to, people have tried, but get traction.
Yeah, and if hard skills are coding, right? Like then naturally the skills that aren't coding are the soft skills. I get it. I personally have a tough time trying to wrap my head around that because I think it's a weaker adjective than what those skills are for some reason.
Yeah.
And I don't even really know if I have like a strong opinion on the matter. It just kind of bothers me.
I can see it.
This is really interesting. I've never been to a presentation like this. I was really thinking when I joined, it's going to be like a presentation. It's really a very well done. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
And something that bothers me is that, when you graduate from college and other places, places don't teach you that, this is a very important aspect of having a fulfilling career. I am myself, I learned it the hard way, and I'm still learning. I'm in that, weird place where technical skills got you somewhere, but then in order to move up, networking matters, and small talk matters, elevator pitch matters, and just getting all of that is not easy. And I wish, going back 10, 15 years, if I had a head start, I would have been better, right? No one teaches you also on the job. It's one of those things where, if you're good, you pick it up. If you don't, you don't. And don't know if there's a solution for it other than like taking communication classes in college and encouraging people to do so. I don't know.
Yeah. That's the thing. I think you bring up a good point, because a lot of us will learn, if I learn a new technology or something like that, I can get ahead early in your career. But then as you mentioned, you kind of get to a point where, okay, I can learn another technology or something, but that's not going to have as much difference at this point. You need to learn some things like, like you're saying, communication, collaboration, so it's important.
Yeah. And it'll keep you relevant. I mean, you got to learn the technology. There's no way, at least that's what I believe, that if it's a manager, senior manager, partner, or whatever, right? They got to know the technology, know the chops, but at the same time, what really gets you promoted or successful in those higher levels and be happy, you can brute force into becoming a manager or something like that, but you'll not be happy in that job unless you really have the skills to be successful in that job. It directly correlates to the happiness factor of you being in that job. So
yeah, and that's the thing, like I have that person, Eric, in the presentation. I think a lot of us have worked with somebody, whether it's a software developer or some position where they're good at it, but they lack those social skills to have some tact and maybe, be collaborative. They want to have, some of the people want to, it's, if it's a good idea, it's mine. If it's, if somebody else's idea, it's no good. It's like, that's not, as teams work, it's hard to have people like that.
Yeah. Really enjoyed. Thank you.
Yeah, I second what he said. Really well done, Tom. This was great.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And me, Tom, I've worked with you before, and I don't like working with people that are that way. I'm a very, friendly, outgoing kind of person, and I work with some people like that, and it's like, sometimes it's like, I know this sounds bad, but their arrogance, is, just drives me crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because, I work with some developers, and they are that way. And then it's like, hey, you know what? Your code's broken. It doesn't work. And like, no, you're not doing it right. I'm like, yeah, I'm doing it just how you told me to, but it still doesn't work. And if you'd like, you can come over and watch what I'm doing. And so you always got to kind of find that, I don't know, that happy medium, so to speak, to deal with people like that, and to actually get them to work with you. And very good presentation, though.
Thank you. It's kind of like, is it Yatin? Is that how you say your name?
Yes.
Yep.
Right.
So you had mentioned kind of, being like realizing you don't know everything. I think that you kind of have to have that empathy and that understanding and that vulnerability. Because I think that's one thing I've seen a lot of developers. There's kind of this macho culture that I know everything. I have to know everything. I have to know all the answers. And it's like, you're not going to, you can try to read every blog, and I know people have tried to do that. You won't know everything. And kind of like Mike said, your code's going to break sometime. Even if you write a lot of unit tests, you're going to miss something, and you have to realize that, okay, I'm not perfect, and that's okay. Any other questions from Nick or Dylan or?
Let's say, does anybody have anything else?
Dusty's been
No
quiet.
questions from me. Sorry for being super late. Work stuff came up.
No worries.
No need to apologize. It happens to all of us.
Yes,
Oh,
definitely.
well, and like I said, I think, so this is getting recorded, so it'll get posted out to our YouTube channel. And so that way, if anybody missed it or wants to watch it again, it'll be out there.
Excellent.
I'll definitely take a look.
For you to watch. And I suppose with that, Tom, it's already almost 6 o'clock at your house.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right. I just wanted to point out, if there's any place else you think that this would be a good topic. I know Carter and I had kind of discussed this a little bit before in some emails, but if there's another venue you think this would fit, let me know. This is one of the first places I'm giving it. I just want to get this out there to a lot of people. So I appreciate that.
Well, we'll keep an eye out.
Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's time, and thanks Mike and Dusty for allowing me to do this. So I appreciate that.
Well, and thank you for taking the time to do it.
You bet. Anytime.
Thanks, Tom.
Hey,
Thanks.
man, thank you, Tom.
Good
Good to
to
see
see
you.
you.
All right.
Talking with you.
Hey, tell Jessica hello for me.
I will do that. I will do
All
that.
right. Sounds good.
Cheers.
All right. Take care of yourself.
You too.
Bye.